The time is now for the Dr. Bob Sports Podcast. I am Tanner. I am our head of analytics, and I'm in my 8th year working alongside Bob to originate our NFL and college basketball bets. And today, as always, I am joined by our digital media specialist, Grant. Week 18 is here, and there is a lot to sort through.
Yeah, a bunch of these teams already locked up their playoff spots here, so I was thinking maybe we go a little rapid fire through those games, see if there's any value for us. So let's start with the Raiders and Chargers game.
Yeah, and I lean Raiders here. The Chargers are in the postseason as either the 5 or 6 seed, but Los Angeles would have nothing to play for if Pittsburgh beats Cincinnati on Saturday night. And Jim Harbaugh said that, they'd love to be this 5th seed, but they'll do what's best for the team, implying they would rest starters if the Steelers win. Now, the market sort of reflects this. I think the Chargers would be favored by 6.5 if this game was, if that wasn't the case. But the Steelers have a 45% chance to beat the Bengals, and this game might move to pick 'em if that happens and the Chargers rest everyone. So I think this should be priced more like 3.5 than 4.5 as we sit here on Friday. So I would lean to the Raiders right now.
All right, well, our next one is Seattle out to -6.5 from an opener of -2.5 versus the LA Rams.
And I'm going to lean over here. Sean McVay said he's excited to see Jimmy Garoppolo and Blake Corum out there. The Rams are going to be playing backups, even though they could be either the 3 or 4 seed. Sean McVay has always valued rest, and he's going to go with that again. But I don't think the Rams offense is going to be terrible with Jimmy Garoppolo and Sean McVay calling the plays. I mean, that's a pretty good situation for as far as backups go. And, you're looking at the Rams, just need to get to 17 points to exceed their expectation here. We know Seattle's offense is going to be trying hard as Geno Smith has all those incentives. So I lean over 38.5 as we sit here on Friday.
All right, well, we've got New England +2.5 versus Buffalo, and Buffalo is already locked into the 2 seed in the AFC.
Okay, and I'm going to lean New England here because they are locked in. Now, Josh Allen's going to start this game, but I expect him to only get one drive here as he's just trying to extend his consecutive starts streak. Now, if I knew Drake May was playing the whole game, I would like to bet New England here. But the problem is, and the reason I'm not going crazy with the Pats is because there's a possibility they might take a look at Joe Milton sometime in the second half here. And without knowing when he's going to come in and knowing that Joe Milton is going to be a pretty major downgrade from Drake May, I can't quite pull the trigger on New England, but I certainly lean in that direction.
Well, the next one is kind of a weird one. You got the Eagles as a 3-point favorite versus the New York Giants.
Yeah, and this is just a situation where the Eagles are locked into the 2 seed. They're going to rest starters, but the Giants are already a team of backups starting. So it's basically just a preseason game here.
Yeah, and the last one where a team will be resting their starters is the Chiefs +10.5 in Denver.
And I think the move is justified here. This opened at -8.5, it out to 10.5, like you said. And I think that's right for the Broncos. The Chiefs are already the 1 seed in the AFC, and they're going to rest Patrick Mahomes and the other starters. Meanwhile, it's a massive game for the Broncos. It's a must win. They need it to get into the playoffs. And I know Carson Wentz, he's a high variance player. So I know a lot of people are pointing out, maybe Chiefs money line here, but I would go the other direction on that high variance and say it's more likely that the Broncos are going to blow out the Chiefs here on Sunday.
Yeah, sorry about that with Carson Wentz. He has got a couple franchises relying on him, so not great. But let's shift it over to our next segment here. We've got the free bet of the week, and you are 18-10-1 on podcast sites and totals dating back to last year. And it looks like we're heading over to the Bengals and Steelers game this week.
Yes, and I'm going to take the over in that Saturday night game for our free bet of the week. So the Bengals are allowing just a 23% pressure rate in the 8 games that starting left tackle Orlando Brown has played more than half the snaps. Compared to, they're surrendering a 38% pressure rate in the 8 games that Brown has been injured. So they go from being one of the worst 3 offensive lines in the NFL to above average, just whether or not Orlando Brown has been injured or not in the game. Now, Brown is going to be on the field on Saturday in this must-win game for the Bengals.
Yeah, and the Bengals need a win and losses by the Broncos and Dolphins to reach the postseason here. And the Steelers also can claim the AFC North with a win and a Ravens loss, but Pittsburgh's still going to be incentivized to play their starters, even if Baltimore wins earlier in the day, to go for the 5 seed and a date versus Houston in the first round rather than playing the Ravens in the first round.
Yeah, so I'm not worried about the Steelers resting the offensive starters for this over because the Steelers want the 5 seed. I mean, the difference between you playing Houston and or the Ravens in the first round is crazy for the playoffs. And I think Pittsburgh's offense has a really good matchup here, when they showed it the last time they played the Bengals. So Arthur Smith's offense kind of revolves around the running backs and the tight ends, dink and dunk layups, and then they hit you with the deep long shots to Pickens every once in a while. But those dink and dunks are going to be wide open against the Bengals because they're 27th in success rate allowed to opposing running backs in the receiving game, and they're 27th in success rate allowed to opposing tight ends. So I think the Steelers are going to get the screen game going. I think they're going to get a lot of passes to Pat Freiermuth going underneath, and they'll be able to hit those enough to open it up downfield to George Pickens. So our model has this total at 50.4, and we're going to take the over as our free bet of the week.
Yeah, love to see some fireworks in that one. But let's shift it to our next segment here. We've got stock up, stock down, and whose stock are you buying this week?
I'm buying Aaron Rodgers in possibly his last start in the NFL.
Ooh, I like that play and spoiler for Miami, who needs a win to have a shot at a playoff berth. And Miami's actually playing at the same time as Denver, and they need the Broncos to lose to jump them in the standings.
Yes, and I think Rodgers will play spoiler here. He had one of his best games of the season in that overtime loss to the Dolphins last month because they give him coverages he's comfortable with. The Dolphins play the third most cover 2 in the NFL, and the Jets are averaging 27% more yards per pass play against cover 2 than other coverages, third best relatively in the league. And Miami will likely be without starting safety Jordan Poyer and starting cornerback Kendall Fuller. I think Aaron Rodgers knows this might be his last start, and he'll want to go out with a bang, slinging it downfield, and maybe putting up 30 points on the Dolphins. I could see something huge for Rodgers here in his last start.
Yeah, that would be pretty sweet. But whose stock are you going to be selling this week?
I'm selling Chicago's defense. I mean, even after holding Seattle's offense to 6 points last week, the Bears are still surrendering 0.16 EPA per play since firing Matt Eberflus. That's 29th in the league. The defense has completely fallen apart since they fired their head coach, and it doesn't have a good matchup this week. The Bears play the third most zone in the NFL, and Jordan Love is averaging a league-high 40% more yards per attempt versus zone than man this season. I think a lot of it is going to go to tight end Tucker Kraft this week, who's third in EPA per target because the Bears are 26th in success rate allowed to opposing tight ends.
Yeah, they didn't get that bump from firing their head coach at all. But let's shift it over. Next segment here is the weather of the week. And what are you seeing out there?
So I wanted to touch on the flip in venue for Houston and Tennessee in regards to weather. These teams met in week 12. The total closed 41, but that game was played indoors in Houston with scoring conditions 0.8 points higher than average by our metrics. This game will be outdoors in the rain with wind gusts of 20 to 30 miles per hour. Our projection for this game has the weather 4.3 points worse than average. So, that's more than 5 points difference just in scoring conditions. I don't see how this total can be above 37 at this point, just based, that game was just played in week 12. And furthermore, the Texans have lost 2 starters on offense since that game. They lost Tank Dell and starting right guard Shaq Mason. Those 2 are worth 1.1 points according to our metrics.
Yeah, and you didn't even mention that the Texans might not be playing CJ Stroud for the whole game because they're already locked into the 4 seed. So count that in. But shifting over to the injury watch, Carolina's defense surrendered 48 points last week, and they are now down 5 starters on the defense from preseason.
And the offense is down 4 starters from the beginning of the season, most notably now right tackle Taylor Moton, who ranks 4th in pass blocking efficiency. So the Panthers, we talked about how the Giants are a team of backups. The Panthers are also a team of backups at this point.
Yeah, and looking at the Falcons, they need a win over the Panthers and a Buccaneers loss to win the NFC South and make the postseason here.
And I do think the Falcons have a pretty good matchup here against the Panthers. First of all, the Falcons defense has the sixth highest zone rate in the NFL, and Bryce Young has struggled against zone compared to man coverages this year. And then on the other side of the ball, the Falcons are averaging 15% more yards per pass play versus middle field closed coverages this season. And the Panthers have the sixth highest single high safety rate in the league. So couple of good matchups for the Falcons, plus all the guys out for the Panthers. It's tough. It's tough to say the Falcons should be more than a touchdown favorite over anybody, but I certainly see why that's the case here in Week 18.
All right, well, let's shift it over to our next segment here. We've got the DraftKings player of the slate, and who are you putting in your lineup this week?
We are going bargain shopping with Dawson Knox all the way down at 3,300. So I've looked at all the incentives the players need to hit this week, and I think this one's going a little bit under the radar. Knox is 8 catches and 89 yards away from a $200,000 bonus. And I think he's going to get a ton of playing time this week because Dalton Kincaid has been battling that knee injury in the second half of the season. I think the Bills will want him to get some rest before the playoffs. Maybe Kincaid plays that first drive and then sits the rest of the game like Josh Allen. And then when Mitch Trubisky comes into the game, I think we'll see a ton of bootlegs and rollouts called where the first read is going to be the tight end. So I think they are going to be peppering Dawson Knox, and all the way down at 3,300 this week, he needs to be in your DraftKings lineup.
Oh, I love that pick. Chasing the incentives too. Always a fun one. But let's shift it over to our primetime preview. And we've got the Lions between 2.5 and 3-point favorites over the Vikings. And the total is at 56. So this game is going to determine the winner of the NFC North and the top seed in the conference. So let's start with Detroit's offense.
Yeah, and the Lions, great offensive line, but they surrendered a season high 4 sacks in that last game against Brian Flores' defense. But when Jared Goff was able to get the ball out, he averaged 8.5 yards per pass play, and that's net yards per pass play, so it includes the sack. So the Lions' offense wasn't necessarily slowed down, but Flores was doing some tricky things up front that they weren't able to pick up. Now, Minnesota's defense is third in EPA per target allowed to opposing running backs, and I do think they're going to snip out those screens to Jahmyr Gibbs. So Goff will instead be looking to get the ball out quickly on the inside to Amon-Ra St. Brown. And St. Brown has a 67% success rate this season. That's so much higher than even the second best wide receiver, Mike Evans, who's at a 63% success rate. And the league average success rate to wide receivers is 51%. So it just goes to show Amon-Ra St. Brown is having an historic season as a slot receiver. And St. Brown, he's got a favorable matchup this week. The Vikings, Flores' defense always kind of struggles against slot receivers, and he'll be lined up across from nickelback Byron Murphy, who's running 1.72 yards per cover snap in the slot, ranking 23rd out of 24 qualifying nickelbacks.
Okay, well, shifting over to the other side of the ball, Sam Darnold did come through with us for their free bet of the week last week, but do you think he's going to have another good game here?
I think so. I mean, this Lions defense is really reeling there. I mean, I can't believe how many points they surrendered last week to a 49ers offense without their entire starting offensive line. It was crazy. I think Minnesota's passing offense has some advantages here because the Lions defense leads the NFL in cover one rate. They have the 7th highest blitz rate, and Darnold's been crushing those this season. Relatively, he's third against the blitz than a standard pass rush, and 7th against cover one compared to other coverages. So the Vikings love when you send 5 guys and man up Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison on the outside. Darnold's not afraid to throw it up and let his receivers win those one-on-one contested catches. So I think that the Vikings will be able to contribute to their end of this extremely high total. Our model has the Lions favored by 1.1 with a predicted total of 57 points.
That is an insanely crazy total, but let's look at your primetime prop, which is 22 and 15 dating back to last year. But what are you going to go with on Sunday night?
Aaron Jones over 18.5 receiving yards. So Detroit's defense is 29th in EPA per target allowed to opposing running backs. And it looks like starting linebacker Alex Anzalone isn't going to push it and try to suit up this week as he prepares to come back for the playoffs. And his backup, Malcolm Rodriguez, is also out. So Kevin O'Connell is going to have his sights set on third stringer Jalen Reeves-Maybin, who is surrendering 10.5 yards per target as a linebacker. That's insane. Aaron Jones has 5 targets each of the last 2 weeks, and I expect him to get at least 5 targets on Sunday night and go over 18.5 receiving yards.
Yeah, love that pick there. That will be a good one. But if you're looking for more content, make sure to head over to drbobsports.com where you see Bob's write-ups for the college bowl games. And you can also sign up for our college basketball service as conference play is getting underway.
Yeah, last night, huge for our 12-1 ticket on UTEP to win Conference USA. We talked about on the podcast a couple of months ago. Miners got a big win over Louisiana Tech, and title favorites Liberty lost at home to Western Kentucky.
Yeah, that was huge for us. And Saturday's slate has 137 games lined up, so I'm sure we'll have a couple bets on that one. But we will be back next Friday to preview the NFL playoffs.